Alright, making I guess a regarding video, maybe. Yeah. Reaction video. This David D. Hilster of Dissident Science fame. It'd be nice if we could have a conversation and get some of this stuff cut to better language or more agreeable language. If you could find a compromise between the two of us, it might be a good thing. The rhetoric, anyway. But probably can't happen, so I'll just do it in this form instead, because there's no other form to do it in. But I just, what he says is just such bullshit, some of it. It's just nonsense. Nothing can be proven. Yeah, we have a standard. It's called reasonable doubt. You're an imbecile if you don't get it. That's sort of the definition of proof. You're an imbecile if you don't get this. And there are things that are overwhelming piles of evidence, and it's just silly to say, well, we can't draw a conclusion ever. It's nonsense. It's nonsense, frankly. It's unreasonable. You're kind of proving yourself an idiot if you think there's no such thing as uncontrovertible evidence. Like you have no ground on which to stand to object except I'm an objector. I object to things. That would be your only standing. You have no piece of evidence that would indicate any reason not to believe. That means something's essentially proven until unproven. Absolute knowledge of the universe is, yes, we can't have complete knowledge. But frankly, we don't need it to rationally interact with the facts. And when the facts are overwhelming, they're overwhelming. I mean, I'm already arguing parts of the argument before I even get to him saying these stupid things. So I picked a sort of randomish place in here. This middle part is where he just goes off the rails, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. So let's play some of it. And I'll make my points. But let's see if there was something he said before then that was worth... I wasn't even deliberate. I was taking notes about another subject and ended up doing his video because it was like, God, that's a stupid thing to say. I'll have to remember that. So anyway, and he's even critiquing the E equals mc squared as if there's some reason to doubt that there is a substantial amount of energy inside of atoms, and that the energy is quite likely quite proportional to the amount of what we call mass. That is, the little bits, the electrons and the protons, are pressurized. They're not in some free state. I'm in a free state, I'm not doing anything. They're doing something in matter, and the thing they're doing is trapping a bunch of anti-gravity. See, there's if you think of, he believes in a particle gravity, and yet he doesn't understand that, well, in a particle gravity, everything just gets smashed together. Well, clearly it doesn't. So clearly there's an mechanism that allows matter to say, that ain't going to happen. You're not pushing me together any closer. I'm not going to get any closer. And clearly that's what's inside of atoms. They're not loosely held together. They're held together with a ton of energy, a ton of pressure pushing out effectively, saying, I want out. I'm trapped. I want out. I want freedom. Okay, and that pressure is what an atomic bomb releases. All that stored energy, reflexive energy, that hasn't been allowed to reflect out of the system. And that's what every atom has in it. And the one good thing Einstein did was say the obvious that other people had also sort of were leaning towards, and he just made it plain. Yes, energy equals mass. If there's something that has mass, it has electrons and protons, it's got energy. It's full of trapped force, and you can get an insane amount of movement when you liberate that force. There's a lot of gravity stuck inside the atoms. They're gravity bombs, nuclear bombs, anti-gravity bomb. So anyway, that's where it started, and it just kept Let's just see if there's anything I have to. The rest should come up in this subject.
For these broadcasts that almost everybody uses, it was written in C++. Other programs are written in Python. Other programs are written in C#.
So this is just the stupidest comment, to compare models of the truth with the fact that we have different ways of programming computers, that is, different programming languages. Huge difference. None of those languages claim to be a model or the perfect way to program. None of them are saying we're going to duplicate something that's in the reality somewhere. None of them are claiming to do that. They're separate languages. Just like separate languages are not telling you what the truth is, they're giving you a way to tell the truth. They're giving you a way to explain, describe. They're not in themselves descriptions. These are descriptions of reality, these models. There's not multiple truths. There can't be both an ether and a corpuscle. Can't be both a wave and a particle. Can't be this duality crap. That's nonsense. There's a right answer. And the whole point here in having these conversations and doing dissident science should be to find the right answer. Not to find the most serviceable answer, the answer that makes our penises the biggest, the answer that makes the girls giggle. That's not the fucking objective. The objective is to find the right answer, to find the fucking truth. And you can weigh the truth value of claims made by people based on what kind of evidence they have for the claim they're making. And the thing that's unfortunate about David is that he and the people he supports just make a lot of claims, and they don't demonstrate anything with a rational drawing, for example, or any kind of statement that would indicate how the thing works. It's just, this just makes dissident science, this makes dissident anything look stupid. It's just counter for the sake of being counter. I mean, the whole group is a bunch of creationists. They're all Christians, okay? Their little Saturday conference is all a bunch of Christians. And they're only being anti because atheism is probably associated with physics in a way. You know, all the physicists are atheists, and so they're saying, oh, they're wrong because they're atheists. That's why they have the wrong model. And they're just looking for a God particle, it seems. That's their motivation. You know, the truth doesn't matter to those people, quite obviously, because they can't, you know, obviously the word evidence and proof can't mean anything to those unreasonable kooks who think this frickin' archaic, silly story made by people who hadn't even figured out how to build an outhouse, hadn't even figured out what a microbe is, didn't even know what thunder and lightning were, and they're letting them tell them what the truth is. 2,000-year-old silly stories. And they're buying it. It's ridiculously stupid. Ridiculously ignorant. And from that corner of idiocracy, he thinks he's going to see the truth? No chance.
Other ones are written in PHP. Other things are database languages like SQL, MySQL. We have NoSQL databases that use...
Right, so you can have all kinds of wacky theories about what reality is because there's multiple programming languages. Because there's multiple programming languages, that means there's a million different ways to address any situation. You don't have to put gasoline in your car. Just mix up some, you know, ammonia and some Ajax and, you know, squirt that in your tank and it'll work just as good because who cares about things having to obey any kind of rules of logic or facts pointing in a direction or any of that nonsense.
Graphing kinds of systems, all kinds of stuff. Are they right or wrong? No.
So are they right or wrong? No. I mean, it's just stupid. They're either all wrong or one of them's right, or might be on the right course, or might be closer to right. They can't all be equally close to right. That seems kind of improbable. You know, but it is quite possible that they're all just missing entirely because they all, and frankly, so many of them are poorly motivated. You know, I'm going to attack what exists. Yes, attacking what exists makes sense because they're way overstating their evidence. They have these tiny shreds of little hairs and a couple of fibers, and they're deciding X, Y, Z. And yes, it's just an evidenced case. They're prosecuting their case at trial, and they're just exaggerating their evidence, and their evidence stinks. You know, they have smudgy fingerprints, and they have contaminated DNA, and they have, you know, bad photographs, and, you know, it's just horrible. And so, yes, that's critiquable. But they're pretending that they have some better pile of evidence. And their pile of evidence is even worse. I mean, it's... look, I drew a picture of it in crayon. You know, look, one guy in a book in 1400 BC said, poo smells bad. See, so it must be true. Sort of is, but you know what I mean. It's just horse shit evidence.
What I would say is, for instance, the model we have has one goal: is to tell you what the physical world's really doing.
So your goal is to attempt to describe the reality accurately. Oh, okay. Well, if that's your goal, then why are you endorsing people who aren't attempting to do that? Because apparently that's what you're saying. Because you can't all be doing that and coming up with answers that are so divergently nowhere even close to similar. Completely divergent efforts going in all kinds of directions indicates that you don't even know what even is coming close to being the truth. Saying you have no standards is fine. Saying you're all just stabbing in the dark, fine, if that's what you're doing. But I think that you can take the tons of evidence that exists and put it together and figure out things like, well, yeah, there's a common speed between all the forces. There's phenomenon of photons that most of the 99.99% of the time, they act like a straight line force. They don't do anything fancy, no radar, no fancy bullshit. They seem to know where they are, and it's only when these interactions with these matter circumstances where they get close to a matter that they start to behave funny, so maybe we should blame the matter and not be blaming the photon. You know, you can logically deduce this crime scene in a rational way.
Really is. What is light? Other models don't do that. If you look at it, what I would say is electric.
Yeah, what your model does is you claim to have solved the problem when you didn't even go near the solution. You just said, I made that go away. I pretended it doesn't exist. Charge doesn't exist. When clearly it exists as a phenomenon. It's hugely existing. It runs our economy, for frick's sake.
Universe model. It's not right or wrong. The electric universe
is not right or wrong. Well, it either is right or it either is wrong. It is not both or neither. It's either close to getting closer to a truth, or it's still way out there missing. It's missing by a lot, or it's missing by a little. You could say, well, it's missing, but it's missing by less. I would say it's missing by just as much as conventional physics, because yes, their evidence is silly. And their theory is silly. Lightning bolts create, craters on the moon. It's silly.
Want to look at it in their way with their model, and they're going to predict that when some object hits a comet, there's going to be a flash because they are looking at
a very tiny little, not exactly something somebody couldn't intuit. Right, that there might be some static charges collected when something is moving through space at 40 or 50,000 miles a second. Yeah, there's a possibility that you might be picking up a little bit of charge doing that.
The electric side of it. So what I would say is if their predictions, if their experiments, I think, what's it called? The Sapphire. I believe that's their experiment that they're...
Yes, the silly plasma. Let's play with plasma because it's cool and interesting and pretty. But it's already a phenomenon. It's already been dissected. We already know what it is. To make the plasma, you basically atomized a substance. You sat there and you burned it and shot atoms off of it. And the atoms are now in a gaseous form held together by electric and magnetic charges. Whoop-de-doo. And creating some photons because of the energy in there. Nothing spectacular about that.
Spending money to do the Sapphire. And if they have a model and they have a prediction, and that model predicts what's going to happen, or they predict, or Walt Thornhill predicts that when the
these are not, tiny little predictions don't really mean anything. They're not really explaining anything. So again, it's just, you can stop right at, you know, this ludicrous notion that something as obvious as asteroid impacts, they're going to contrive with just a deliberate effort to deny the obvious, you know, for no good reason, and pretend these are electrical discharges. It's just silly.
Probe hits the comet, you're going to get a flash. Then that model predicts that. All we have are models, and the only thing models can do is try to predict the world.
No, the idea of the model is to completely envelop the evidence, to say, here's the pile of evidence. Can I keep everything that's in the evidence pile that's good, like this? That's pretty good evidence. Okay, there's a thing happening, and I can know very specifics about how fast it accelerates and different things. So all the really good evidence there is, and you take all the good evidence and you fit it inside a model. That is, you have a model that explains consistently every effect that can be observed. That's the obligation of a model. And so as soon as a model is saying things that are just wacky, like lightning bolts are hitting the moon, it's just stupid.
They give us a model so we can manipulate the world. So if we have models of atoms, we can say, okay, this is the way they sort of stick together. I don't know exactly how, but I'm going to invent this thing called plus and minus.
All right, so he said they invented this thing called plus and minus. They invented it because it made itself so frickin' obvious. It rubbed its feces in your nose. You couldn't miss the smell of the plus and the minus. It was so obviously in the real world. It's a real effect, these plus and the minus. It's real charge. It means the difference between attraction and repulsion. And you haven't dealt with it at all as a subject. You haven't in any way explained how it's not something real that protons and electrons have. That they themselves are these charged elements in the material form. You haven't touched the subject in any kind of rational way.
And no one's given me the answer on the plus and minus yet, huh? I will give...
So anyway, he's doing the little Benjamin Franklin trivia question. You know, who invented it. And yes, he labeled them the wrong way. He labeled the aggressive end, the high pressure, the negative, and the low pressure, the positive, when it should have been the other way around, obviously.
You the answer on the plus and minus. Benjamin Franklin! One of my heroes, actually. I love that guy. He was a statesman, quite a philosopher, and a scientist. So he was the one who called things positive and negative. And then,
yeah, and he certainly wouldn't agree with your idiotic notion, even with his knowledge base, that charge isn't a real phenomenon. He just arbitrarily invented the concept. There was nothing arbitrary or erroneous. The concept was in their face of this very different effect. I can negatively charge two things and they will repel. I can positively charge two things and they will repel. Then I can have a negatively charged and a positively charged and they will attract. That's a real thing that's happening. It's not a fake thing that's happening. And it's the same thing that's holding atoms together.
So what it means is that we're going to have different models, and these models are going to have different predictive powers, but they...
So again, this word prediction is just so irrelevant to the conversation. The idea isn't to predict something. The idea is to complete the evidence picture, to put the puzzle pieces together. Not predict what will be the new puzzle piece. Put the ones that exist together. Tie space, bent space to particle duality bullshit. Fix that crap.
The difference between a lot of different models is that their models are looking to describe certain things, but they don't describe others. What will happen?
Yeah, exactly. And you totally evade the subjects that indicate you're on the wrong track, which is the existence of charge, the strength of that as a force, an incredibly strong force, repulsion and attraction. And then you don't deal with the drag issue at all either. You just sit there and say, well, it's light's very fast, so therefore it doesn't matter. Well, we know things can move very fast, and if they're moving very fast, then they're plowing through an awful lot of force.
happen is we'll start out with electric universe and saying everything's electric, and then they look to see how they can explain it all with positive, negatives, and fields, and how those work. Where we look at it in a different way, where we're saying, no, I want to know the physicality, because electric field, you're not...
You can make the field into a force, and you make the force into a particle. That isn't all that big a leap. So calling something a field doesn't offend me, as long as you recognize it's not a field of nothing, it's a field of something.
Tell me what it is. Is it particles? Is it dust? Is it nothing? Is it mathematics only? I don't believe that. So the difference between, for instance, the model we have is that we're trying to give a physical reason to everything. And so you have a...
Yeah, you're trying to, but you're failing to, because you're headed off on you've decided the universe is infinite, therefore you're going to try to make this into some sort of infinite bullshit, or some other notion. You know, that's like your stupid small and big Earth crap. You know, you haven't really thought about what the implications of this are at all in any way whatsoever, that the moon would have a different orbital cycle, and you could just look at life on Earth, for example, and just say, well, the period of the moon is tied to the, you know, women's periods, even in terms of the length of the cycle. It's so much a part of our genetic code, and obviously it hasn't changed over millions, hundreds of millions of years. So it'd be kind of ludicrous to talk about how the Earth was expanding at the very time life was evolving, because clearly life didn't evolve to a change in lunar cycles. Clearly that old code is still, the old code says the cycle of the moon, and that millions of years old code, that the old DNA says the moon was revolving around the Earth at exactly the same speed as it is today. There's so many ways you can debunk this idea of expanding and contracting, or biggening, smalling and biggening Earth.
The electric universe, the only thing models can do is you cannot prove a model. And if you look at...
So again, of course you can. That's the whole obligation we all have, is to sit there and make the argument. The argument is the proof. Here, I'm presenting you the evidence in the argument. I'm going to arrange the evidence in a nice, as well ordered as I can. I'll explain how, look, Mach gravity, a particle gravity works perfectly. The external force thing explains everything. You don't have to do this woo of somehow matter sucking empty space, and you don't have to bend time, because you can explain why velocity changes the metabolism of physical structures. You know, you make a real argument. You don't just say, I deny that, I deny that, I deny that. You can't just walk into court and say, you know, they show you a piece of evidence and you say, I just deny its existence. Charge, I deny its existence. You can't do that. You have to explain it.
At my video criticizing Dr. don't even know if he's a doctor, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and when he was asked if Einstein could be wrong, and he laughs, and he said it's proven millions of times.
Yeah, well, they all have been trained to say this crap, right? Because they all think Eddington's experiment was legitimate and it wasn't a complete piece of crap, just because it, you know, not his own fault. I mean, it was a crappy, theoretically it was crap anyway. It's so marginal in terms of the capacity of us to do this tiny, tiny measurement. So that was asking too much in the first place. And then he had marginal luck in doing the experiment that completely destroyed any hope, and he just willfully pretended it wasn't as big a failure as it was. But yes, obviously, and then they just keep saying that, you know, because some other experiment has some little glitch in it that does, oh look, that does something, you know, it's just tiny shreds they cling to, and they call that overwhelming evidence, when it's not overwhelming at all. They keep saying that Young's experiment was the nail in the coffin for particle theory, when it's just absolute nonsense in terms of proving or demonstrating that no other explanation could as completely explain, when of course another explanation can, because you're not completely explaining anything with, well, the photon Huygenses and turns into an infinite number of microwaves, little waves, and the little waves all cancel out, and they leave two waves, and those two waves interfere with each other. I mean, that's completely hard. That's just really distant from proof. That's like saying, you know, well, 200 years from now, we're going to have cameras that can see through walls, and if I could take a picture with a camera from 200 years from now, I would have taken a picture of him committing the crime. So he's guilty, right? Because, you know, if I had one of those cameras, I could have taken a picture of him, and I would have, because he was there, right? I mean, it's such weak evidence.
The second, in particle accelerators, no, you can't prove anything. You can't prove anything.
So again, yes, you can make good arguments, you can make crappy arguments, and there's some things that are proven. Evolution's a proven fact. The volume of evidence is completely eliminates all reasonable doubt. And if you're doubting it, you're an imbecile. Plainly. You're ignorant, you're stupid, you're ill-informed, and you're obviously obnoxious to the truth. You don't want to hear the truth because it's so overwhelmingly proven as a fact.
You can't prove that any model is right. What you can do is...
So again, that statement is just so obnoxious. Then what are you doing this for? Why are you even talking? Why are you making an argument for anything if you can't demonstrate to be superior and to be superior in some substantial way? If you don't think that's a hopeful task, then you're wasting your fucking time with this talking crap.
Show support for the model. And I'll give you an example of that, and that's the periodic chart.
Support is irrelevant and beyond the fact of evidence. So all you're really arguing is, I just want to create a new populist movement called idiocracy, where we'll believe in silly crap like swirly stuff makes stuff attract. Magnets are attracting because there's 50,000 times more energy swirling around the magnet than the force of the attraction. So there's like a nuclear bomb worth of energy swirling around every magnet to create the necessary amount of flow to create the attraction you think is being created by that flow. Such a loop-de-doo pile of crap as a theory.
The periodic chart is very well organized. It's used for many, many, many years. But guess what? We don't know. We don't even think about quarks when we're doing the periodic chart.
Well, then, so why are you bringing them up? The periodic chart is an effort to recognize the similarities and the obvious thing, which is there's little atoms and big atoms. You put the little ones on the top and the little big ones on the bottom. That sort of makes sense. And you categorize them by different kinds of properties they end up having because of their mathematical connections to each other in the sense of having even numbers of electrons versus odd numbers and blah, blah, blah.
Yet we still don't have a good model of how atoms and molecules fit together. We have computer programs that try their best at it, but they tweak them all the time.
Yes, their model sucks. That's a legitimate claim to make. Their model is insufficient. It doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. It's all tied together with a bunch of, made up stuff. And it doesn't get to the core issues. In the sense of it doesn't even explain how a photon is created in any realistic way. It doesn't give you any feel for mechanism. And they just made it up because they did a simple comparison and said, well, let's look at the big universe and we'll just assume the small universe is doing it exactly the same way in the sense that stuff doesn't crash because it's orbiting, when magnets can create an orbit that doesn't need to move. You can levitate things in a position with magnetism. You don't need them to have a velocity to prevent from crashing. You can magnetically lock them in a position.
Because every time you use a computer program to try to build a new molecule, it ain't perfect, because when they do build it and then they look at it with like an electron microscope or something like that, they find out, ooh, it's not...
You can't look at the molecule with electron microscopes. It's silly.
Exactly that way, and they adjust it. Why? Because we don't have a real good model. What we have is a simple model.
Yes, their model sucks, but your model sucks even more. That's the real problem, okay? Their model sucks, but yours sucks more. Frankly. Yours is even less evidenced.
Yeah, really. We have protons, neutrons, and electrons. And we say that there's positive charges and negative charges, and they have to balance out, blah, 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 blah. The electron isn't got magical powers. It doesn't have a plus sign. We never saw a plus sign on an electron. What it is it's what we think it is a...
So you have it backwards anyway, because obviously electrons would have the minus sign on them. And they clearly wear it as clothes. That's exactly what they're doing in every respect. In every respect, in very reliable ways, they react to this field of negativeness. So if I create a field of force consistent with them, I will cause repulsion. Okay, like repels like, and if I do the opposite, they will obey. So to say there's no phenomenon here, there's a ton of phenomenon, and it's clearly incredibly powerful, and it's clearly a huge portion of function. Everything's functioning based on charge. Charge is what's holding it all together. Hugely important. Huge.
Particle, and it's whirling around the nucleus, and it stays there. And just because we say there's a plus on it, and the proton's a plus, and the electron's a minus.
Yes, because you have to account for the fact that something has to be accounting for the fact that these things don't just crash into each other and combine into some bigger rock. They just don't turn into bigger rocks, and there's a reason they don't. And the reason is because the like rocks can't do that.
Then they stay together. Well, no. So the electric universe chooses to stop at that level. They choose to stop at that level. And then you have predictive power. Yes, you can predict. But...
well, they choose to label everything as to unify the force, which makes perfectly good sense, but they're obviously, and I would argue, unifying on the lamest of the concepts, which is the idea of an electrical force, because there is no electrical force. There's just magnetism, there's gravity, and then there's light. That's all you got. There's no electric force. Okay, electricity is created when atoms share pressure, when they transfer pressure. You need a conductor for electricity to move. It can't shoot across empty space and blow craters in the moon. Can't be done. Not a possible explanation.
We are still in our infancy. The only big thing that we've done since Newton is really the atomic structures.
It's just such a silly thing to say when all of the best parts of our technology, the whole electric grid, motors, all the horsepower, the work, the industry created by that huge volume of energy. I mean, come on. What a nonsense statement.
Of simply that there's a nucleus, there are electrons, we try to put it down, but we don't have any explanation. Because we should have whole numbers.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of evidence indicating that there's this electric thing is really tied to electrons. And the fact that the electrons are on the outside of atoms makes the whole thing make a lot of sense, that what's going to get interacted with more? The thing buried way, 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 way in the center, or the thing on the outside?
For even atoms. But the way they combine the nucleuses, we don't know. There are now particle physicists today who think, and that's Dr. Bill Lucas has said this.
Yeah, well, Dr. Bill Lucas is a creationist. He's a kook who believes Jeebus was the son of God. He believes the Holy Ghost is whatever. I don't know what he thinks the Holy Ghost is. He thinks God invented a devil for no good reason, and angels and all this other stuff, a hierarchy of love. You know, are you a gold angel or are you just a brown angel? Are you a peon or one of the authority holies, the ultimate holy? What a crock of shit, a silly fucking fable, a Santa Claus story, and that lunatic believes it's the reality. He actually believes there's some stupid place called heaven, and you somehow walk around there in some dull days where you don't even remember you were married, and you don't even remember your kids. You remember nothing. You care about nothing, apparently, because there's nobody to care about, because you don't have any memories. Because obviously, if you did have memories, you'd be saying, oh shit, you sent my sister to hell? What the fuck do you mean? You sent my sister to fucking hell? The whole thing is so fucking stupid, even if it had one shred of evidence for it. Who would want it to be true? It's a fucking nightmare story. It's a Freddy nightmare fucking god. He's an idiot. He's a lunatic. Live, die, and forget. Oh, what a great idea. Not.
That there is no neutron. What?
Yeah,
So-
just idiotic. Clearly the neutrons are what makes the protons capable of being right next to each other. They couldn't be neighbors, so it's like, you know, you got a Republican, then you have to have a Democrat between it, and then, you have Democrat, Republican, you have to have neutron in between them, you know, repulsive things. I'm just thinking, you can't, the protons could never be a little tiny nucleus if it wasn't for the neutrons. They're the thing obviously making it possible for those protons to get a lot closer to each other than they should be. Duh.
So we are still in our infancy, even with atomic structure. We're not good at it. And until we get a
Yes, their model sucks. Your replacement sucks more.
real physical model of what's going on there, and it's not has to do with quarks, we're still pretty much stuck. We've been 450 years trying to come up with a model. So the answer is the electric universe has their model and their predictions. It has to do with positives, negatives, and electric fields. They're not going to tell you what that is. They're just going to say that's what they are. And
Yes, well, who cares? So, yes, let's just say, who cares what we make the field out of, as long as we know the field it has the force, because the force blows a crater on the moon. So we know there's force connected to the field, so that's good enough for me, if they can at least acknowledge that. But the whole point of it is it doesn't have any experimental validity. There's no way you can shoot electricity through empty space, because electricity is a phenomenon that takes place inside a conductor. It's between atom and atom and atom and atom. It's not some magical force you can just shoot somewhere, because guess what? When you turn into a magical force you can just shoot somewhere, it looks just like a laser beam then. It's light. It's something else. Or magnetism. It is not electricity. Electricity is atom dependent. Okay, the force isn't atom dependent.
then what they're going to
Well,
do...
it's atom dependent in the sense that it can't mean anything if there's no electrons and protons for it to affect. It affects electrons and it affects protons, and it affects them inversely. And quite obviously that's a perfectly valid explanation of exactly what's taking place here. There's a force that inversely affects two objects you place in the force. And that's all you need to have a very complex universe.
They're going to use that model to do predictions. To prove that if you were to say that I can prove to you that the universe is electric, you're lying. No one can prove anything.
Well, again, this idea that nobody can prove anything. They could if they had something called evidence. Now, you take a videotape of the giant lightning bolt blowing a crater on the moon, that'll be pretty good evidence. But I guess shoot a lightning bolt even a few feet in space and I'd be impressed. But we're not going to see that. The only way they're going to shoot anything in space is they're going to have to take some hard material, vaporize, burn it, until all the atoms fly off and create a blob of atoms that travels through space and then lands somewhere else. That's the only way they're going to ever do it.
About anything. All we can do is come up with models, come up with a periodic chart, come up with...
Yeah, come up with crap that isn't any better than the crap that the prosecutor came to court with. So you're just saying, let's just line up a bunch of lawyers and let them all just talk shit with absolutely nothing in their package in terms of any kind of coherent explanation. So, and again, I'd say your theory fails. I mean, I'm advocating for exactly the same thing in the sense that there's gravity's particles. But that's where we end. That's the end of our similarities, because you think somehow this gravity is being bent by some other mega particle underneath it that's moving twice the speed of light, which is ludicrous nonsense, because that force couldn't be completely hidden from us and we'd end up getting messages from it now and then. And so then you'd have faster than the speed of light communication and all the paradoxes that creates. So it's just stupid.
Rules for electronic circuits. Use those to our benefit to manipulate.
Electronic circus. Huh? Freudian slip, I guess.
The universe around us. That's what is happening. Do we do it with quantum mechanics? People say, of course we do. We have quantum computers, but I've told people about that as well. We have quantum computers because those things have to do with non-zeros and ones. That's nothing to do with quantum mechanics. It's zero.
There's no quantum computers, so of course it doesn't. And obviously, it doesn't have anything to do with computing. Okay, a qubit is an irrational concept. An undecided bit is just nonsense. A bit that somehow jumps to the future, gets the right answer. I don't have to do the math. I don't have to add 2 plus 2. I just go to 4. That's their concept, essentially, and it's silly. I'll just jump to the answer dimension without having to go through the equation dimension. It's just baby talk.
You know, it's people. I saw. Go to my second to the last video from this one. Go 2 videos back from the. If you're watching this recording, go back 2 videos from this one, and you're going to see the one on Albert Einstein. The page, does the universe still need Einstein? You're going to see things that are just make your toes curl when it comes to.
Yes, their claims are outrageous. This claim that quantum mechanics cured cancer or whatever. You know, quantum mechanics made the wheel round. Quantum mechanics makes everything happen, and it's just crap. An understanding of the electrodynamics of the world that you're denying, this hugely important relationship between these corpuscles of energy in the photonic form, little bits moving the speed of light, the forces, gravity, magnetism, particularly, and photons, and their effect on electrons. That's the universe, okay, in its simplest form. 99% of the action happens there.
Saying that quantum mechanics or relativity or whatever it is, it makes us be able to smell rose or something like smell some flower. Guys, no. Go and look for yourselves. Don't take my word for it. Go out there and try to find a real example of E equals mc squared. It's not the atomic bomb. And like I said,
just a silly thing to say when it's clearly the most glaring example that there is a ton of energy inside of atoms, and when you break atoms, and that's what a nuclear bomb is doing, it's breaking them very overtly and doing it in a way you should be able to concede. I mean, it's shooting neutrons in, getting extra neutrons out, creating a chain reaction of fall apart, basically. It's basically giving the atoms a virus. The virus causes them to fall apart, and all the little bits come flying off because they're all pressurized. Because the atom is basically anti-gravity. It's basically trapped pressure to keep it from collapsing. It's fighting against the pressure pushing in. Durr.
So, again, multiple and different models are going to have different abilities to explain the universe.
Yes, that's the point. Right. So why are you saying they're all equal? Why are you pretending that they're all equal? They're substantially unequal. There's ones that are absolutely batshit crazy. Sasquatch did it. Are you going to allow somebody who has a Sasquatch theory into your group? Okay, he thinks Sasquatch farts electrons, and that's where all the electrons came from in the universe, is Sasquatch farted them. Is that a valid theory of something? Is there some piece or shred of evidence indicating that's the truth somewhere? You just let people make all kinds of claims, and you never sit there and say, no, you've really got to be limited. If you're going to make a claim, draw me a picture. Show me. Somewhere you got to say, show me. Show me your argument. I mean, you're making this argument. Okay, let me, I'll draw a little bit just for the fun of it. Just to emphasize a point that, he just makes claims. Okay, so this charge thing, he doesn't think he needs charge because what he thinks is happening is he thinks, atoms are, electrons, let's say. So you have 2 electrons, and he thinks, okay, that there's actually shit spinning around them. All right, so he thinks the electron is a spinning thing, and that there's all this current is spinning around them. Okay, and so they're both spinning in the same direction because they're electrons, and the electrons all spin the same way. So obviously this is going to be the opposite of this one. So they're moving in opposite directions. Oh my God. And so they have so much crap spinning around the electron. The electron is making all this stuff move. All this stuff is moving. And they think there's another force moving c c squared, right? A c squared force of little bits that's pushing, okay, on these little bits going around the electron. So these would be like photons. And there'd be so much of this, you know, tons and tons. It's just an insane amount of stuff going around and around. And so he thinks that, you know, what's been found is that this flow pattern, okay, will make like things repel, in the sense that they're spinning the same way. They'll end up repelling because obviously these two forces are against each other, all right, and so that makes them repulsive in terms of this one's pushing a bunch of stuff this way and this one's pushing a bunch of stuff this way. So you can sort of get the indication that they're causing a force that's going to push this one that way, and it's going to push this one that way. And so they're obviously not going to be able to move into each other because there's a force pushing them away directly. But this force is 1,000,000 times weaker than this force. The amount of energy it takes to do this is 1,000,000 times more energy than the amount of repulsion, movement away from each other you're going to get as an effect. So it just doesn't make any sense, because we know how strong magnets are. You know, you stick two magnets together, they're stuck together. This isn't some stupid swirly stuff. And when they're stuck together, it doesn't make any sense that there could still be stuff swirling around anymore, right? I mean, how could they stick together and still be spinning in effectively opposite directions, right? I mean, they can't stick together if one thing's going this way and one thing's going this way. Oh, well, no, they both go in the same way. But there's still the idea that they're sticking together. And then what happens to all this stuff that's spinning around? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Some of it's got to be going this way. So how's it ever going to come back around again? It's going to be set free as a force. It's just nonsense to think this is what's causing electrons and protons, the very strong forces displayed by charge and magnetism. You're going to explain with this swirly crap? Forget about it. Can't be the right answer. Can't be.
In our particular model, it's one of the more thorough models.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's the most unthorough. Again, you just ignore subject drag. It doesn't exist. It doesn't. Not important. It was a problem for me. I hated this subject for quite a while because, yeah, it's like, what the fuck? It's a real subject. You got to figure out a real answer. And I figured out the real answer, which is this absorption of energy thing ain't what we think it is. Energy is actually absorbed by electrons and protons. They can't move unless they actually eat the energy. They have to keep it. They have to have it in them. They have to consume it like a potato chip and keep it for a while.
We'll tell you exactly what something is.
Bullshit. You tell us the charge doesn't exist. One of the most outstanding, most incredibly powerful, most... I mean, just glaringly, it's related to all technology we have that's of any real value. There's some charge component in it. I mean, magnetism and charge are everything.
Exactly what light is. We can tell you why that...
Nah, not even close again. He thinks light is made of a zillion of these little particles, and that an electron is made out of the same stuff. Now, can that possibly make any sense? And okay, you have one photon is made out of 1,000,000 of these things, you know, in some frequency form, and the electron is what, made out of a trillion of them? Forget it.
Light bends, you know, and we can tell you physically what it is. This is what it is, and to me, that's what people are wanting. And I'm not doing it because my dad and I sat down one day on the beach and said, hey, let's do.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I don't think you sat on a beach, actually, but I mean, it's exactly what happened.
A model. It was just me hanging around with people and my dad having this big breakthrough, and that's what happens. But models can't be proven. Yes,
that's exactly what you do. You attempt to prove them. I mean, maybe you want to say oh, there's no such thing as enough evidence to ever convict anybody of a crime. I mean, you can have videotape, and you can have genetic evidence, and you can have all kinds of 15 people saw it, and it doesn't matter how much evidence. But no, it does matter. There's circumstances where you say that's enough evidence. Now, obviously, all of these models, we're going to be all stuck with the same fact that we can't see electrons, and we can't see protons, and we can't videotape what's happening, and we can't see the little photon forces and all that other stuff. But so we have to make an argument. We have to compose the argument and explain, like, here's the 100 pieces. And I'm just going to explain to you, this is how they all kind of fit together, and it'll all work, you know, if you fit them together starting here. All right, if you start here, they won't fit together. If you start over there, they won't fit together. If you start here, speed of light, magnetic atoms, not spinning atoms, you know, it'll fit.
Model can be better and more explanatory, and I actually started an article in just title format today, and you know what I'm saying? It's the next physics model that we will accept isn't going to be chosen by the physicists and the eggheads and the intellectuals in the university.
Right, it'll be chosen by idiocracy, and it's going to be it's going to have a Jeebus particle in the middle. The idiots are just going to come up with fruitcake crap, the tinfoil hat, the worst tinfoil hat theory, which is going to be some kind of glorify Homer Simpson model. Homer Simpson is the singularity.
It's going to be chosen by us looking at all these models and people just using them.
Yeah, people who have no information, haven't gone into any detail to actually do experiments, actually examine the evidence that exists, spent real hard hours of their life having to figure out the history of something. Okay, Newton did this experiment, then Rutherford did this, and then they did this, and then they did this, but then they drew this conclusion, and okay, that conclusion seems a little bit extreme for the weakness of this evidence. It takes work to examine the evidence. It's work.
A guy, you know, Chris Ekman, who's in CMPS, has been looking to see with our model what if we had anything that he can do with the model and do things that haven't been done before. Now that's a good model. Is it right? No. It's a good model, yeah.
It's a good model. It's not right. So what sense does that make? It's not right, but it's a good model. No, it's not a good model if it's not right. The whole point is if it has flaws and it doesn't fit, you have to acquit, so to speak. You know. And clearly we know that that phrase comes from the very denial of the truth that the people with agendas tend to do. They just deny the truth.
Is it proven in that model then that that's the way the universe works? No, it's a model that mimics what we're doing with the universe, and it's useful because that's another moral question.
More of this crap about use. Utility is irrelevant, in my opinion, to this pursuit. The pursuit is, what is the fucking truth? How does this thing we're existing in function?
Question is, do we sit around doing all these things and there's no use for it? And, you know, oh yeah, we can just talk about unicorns all day. They don't exist, but hey, it's making a living because we talk amongst ourselves and pay attention.
And you're suggesting that that's what the dissidents should do. They all should just invent purple unicorns and pink ones and green ones and all kinds of color of unicorn and not hit the truth. Who cares? Just invent things with legs and horns, you know, hippopotamuses with a horn. We'll call it faticorns.
Each other stuff, and universities pay us to pretend that we're advancing science. I almost said Ben Franklin. He was a pretty kink. Yeah, he was. He had a. I know he had a lot of girlfriends around there. That's for sure. But he was a fascinating man. Nothing isn't as it seems, plus and minus, a delta scale, nothing.
Yeah, it's just stupid. Nothing is as it seems. All this baby talk. You can't know nothing for nothing. You can't do this. All this denial. We have a ton of evidence. It's just that, again, everybody wants to be an authority without having to actually go through the process of drawing a picture and making it fit and doing all this grunt work. You know, spending hours of their life pondering it and trying to figure out the problem, and they just want to have the truth and they want to have the right to assert without doing the work. And that's sort of bullshit. Alright, so we've probably done enough of this, right? Well, we'll go one more.
Simple, okay. There really is no such thing as negative. Everything is equated to a charge potential difference. Yeah.
Yeah. That just doesn't work, okay? I mean, clearly, electrical potential, which is pressure, that's the atom thing again. So, yeah, the atoms don't, the electron pressure, you know, whether electron is relaxed or fully pressurized, okay, that doesn't have a positive and a negative. The consequence, though, of the electrons changing their position is now the proton has more visibility. So it's a fact that the proton has a force effect converse to the electron, which is in itself a kind of a real event, a real thing. Okay, the positive and the negative side of the magnet are equally influential. So it's sort of a denial of the truth to say there's no positive and negative when the northness and the southness are real things, and those things are just manifestations of charge. They're just a manifestation of the fact that electrons and protons are different.
I mean,
fundamentally.
If you look at mathematics for physics, you should only be working in the first quadrant where y and x and z are, well, in that case you got 8. Is it 8? 1, 2, 3,
6.
Only in positive, because negative is just our number system where we decide to put an origin somewhere and go past that origin.
It's just stupid. So again, not in physics. Okay, now we're not talking about mathematics. Mathematics creates negative numbers because you can have anti. You can create the opposite of. You can create up and then you have the down. Above the crust of the earth, below the crust of the earth. So that concept exists as a mathematical concept from other elements of physics. But the physical concept in physics of plus charge and minus charge are real things. The plusness and the minusness have a real consequence that has to do with the difference between electrons and protons. And the difference between electrons and protons isn't that protons are like a little bit like an electron is really electron. It's not just some gradual scale of electronness. Protons aren't like less electron and electrons are electron. No, they're two different things, and the word positive and negative to describe those two different things is adequate. Now again, with electricity, yeah, it's still kind of, it's so related to the plus and minus of the charge, or the north and south of the magnet, that they've used the same term for it. But no, the electric current is just a scale of pressure. There either is high pressure or there's low pressure. The ground, the zero, is arbitrary.
In the physics world, you don't need it. You don't need negative. Periodic table, wasn't it? Verified versus alchemy table. No, it's a better model for sure. The periodic table is a wonderful model. Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't even call it a model, so I don't even know why. It's an effort to organize, but it doesn't offer any insights into causes for the different properties. It's just establishing some coherency between properties and atomic number and number of electrons in terms of even odds and all that kind of stuff. Full electron, whatever you call those, levels, whatever they're called. I forget the word for it. Shells. Full shells versus empty shells.
It's not real accurate when you start building molecules, because at that point then you're just sort of making rules up. Don't know.
Again, it's not, they don't do that in the periodic table, but clearly we have a lot of insights into combining atoms, and that some are combined by just a weak connection to a scatter electron, and some are combined because they're sharing an electron, and some are combined because they're sharing 2 electrons. Okay. So enough for now. But this wishy-washy, any theory is a good theory, is just bullshit. Yuck. I see this as the other way around. This is like all the theories are religions, and then evolution shows up. And it's just completely different. And that's what the truth is going to look like. So I'd argue the truth isn't going to look like the wrong answers. It's going to look like something different. And that's just, it's going to be just like that. There's one truth. And once you start to see a glimmer of it, it's just going to be like, oh yeah, that can't. That happened to me. Okay, it's that obvious. Once you start seeing it, it just gets bigger and bigger. You see more and more and more and more and more and more. And it just fits and fits and fits and answers all the questions. And you're done with the fables. You're done with the 3 pig stories. So anyway, till the next time and such.